Jake Harrison stood at the window of the command center and looked out at the dark sky. The stars looked the same as they always did, but everything else had changed. 18 months ago, New Haven Colony had been a busy place with people working hard to mine the valuable metals from this distant moon. Now it was quiet, too quiet. The communication array on the roof was broken. Twisted metal and burned wires were all that remained of their only way to talk to Earth. Jake touched the glass with his fingers and felt cold, even through the thick walls that kept the air inside their small world. 3,000 people lived here, and every one of them was trapped. Behind him, the communications room buzzed with the sound of broken equipment. Amy Blake sat at her desk, trying to fix another radio that had been damaged in the last attack. She was only 22 years old, but she had become their best hope for getting a message out. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight knot, and her blue eyes were red from staying awake too long. "Any luck with the long-range transmitter?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer from the look on her face. "The main power coupling is fried," Amy said without looking up. "I can maybe get a short-range signal working, but nothing that would reach Earth, not even close." Jake nodded and walked over to the large table in the center of the room. A map of the colony was spread out on top, marked with red X marks where the aliens had attacked. The red marks were everywhere now. The mining equipment was gone. The power plant was running on backup generators. Even the water treatment facility had been hit. The aliens called themselves the Krillians. They were tall, about 7 feet, with green scaly skin and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. They had sharp teeth and claws, and they moved like hunting animals. But the worst thing about them was how they talked. They spoke perfect English, which meant they had been watching humans for a long time. Dr. Lisa Martinez walked into the command center carrying her medical bag. She looked tired, and Jake could see blood on her white coat. The doctor was in her 40s with brown hair that was starting to turn gray. She had been working without sleep for 3 days straight. "How many this time?" Jake asked. 7 injured. "Too serious," Lisa said, setting down her bag. "The Johnson family got caught outside when the Krillians made their patrol run. Little Bobby Johnson has a broken arm, but he'll be okay. His parents are pretty shaken up, though." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. The Krillians liked to hurt people just to make a point. They did not need to attack families, but they did it anyway. It was their way of showing the humans that they were in charge now. "Where's Ben?" Jake asked, looking around the room. "Still working on the power grid," Lisa said. "He thinks he can keep the lights on for maybe another week if we're careful. After that—" She did not finish the sentence. Ben Cooper was the colony's chief engineer. He was a big man with strong hands and a beard that was always messy. He had been working day and night to keep the colony running since the attack started. Without power, they would all be dead in hours. The door opened and Rick Turner came in. He was the head of colony security, but there was not much security left ahead. Most of his men were dead or too hurt to fight. Rick was a former soldier who had come to New Haven to start a new life. Now he was trying to keep everyone alive. "What's the situation outside?" Jake asked. "Quiet for now," Rick said. "But they're still out there. I can see their ships in the distance. They're just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For us to give up, I think. They don't want to destroy the colony completely. They want us to work for them." Jake had heard this before. The Krillians were not just raiders, they were slavers. They took over planets and moons and made the people work for them. They had done it to dozens of other colonies across this part of space. The humans were just the latest target. The Krillian commander had a name that sounded like Vexstar when he said it. He was older than the other aliens, with more scars on his face and arms. He had come to the colony 3 months ago with a simple message: surrender or die. When the humans refused, the attack started. At first, the colonists had fought back. They had mining equipment that could be used as weapons. They had explosives for breaking rocks that could be used as bombs. But the Krillians had real weapons, energy guns that could cut through metal and personal shields that stopped bullets. "How much food do we have left?" Jake asked Lisa. "Maybe 2 weeks if we're careful," she said. The hydroponic gardens are? Still working, but they can't feed everyone. We lost too much when they hit the storage buildings. Jake walked back to the window. In the distance, he could see the lights of the Krillian ships. They were big and ugly, with sharp edges and dark. Metal, they looked like they were made for war, not exploration. The humans had come to this moon to mine and build and create something new. The Krillians had come to take and destroy and make slaves. "Sir," Amy called from her desk, "I'm getting something on the emergency frequency." Everyone turned to look. At her, she was wearing headphones and had her hand on a dial, trying to make the signal clearer. "It's them," she said quietly. "The Krillians. They're broadcasting to the whole colony." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Put it on speaker. The voice that came through the radio was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. It spoke in English, but with an accent that made every word sound like a threat. "Humans of New Haven Colony," the voice said. "This is Commander Vexstar of the Krillian Third Fleet. You have resisted our generous offer of employment for too long. We give you one final chance to surrender." Jake wanted to turn off the radio, but he knew everyone in the colony was listening. They needed to hear this. "You will gather in the main square at dawn tomorrow," the voice continued. "You will bring no weapons. You will submit to our authority, and you will work for the glory of the Krillian Empire. If you refuse, we will destroy your colony and everyone in it. You have until sunrise to decide." The radio went quiet. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his people. Amy was crying. Lisa was holding her medical bag like it was a shield. Rick was checking his weapon, even though they all knew it would not help against the Krillian ships. "What do we do?" Amy asked. Jake did not know. He was supposed to be the leader, but he felt like just another scared person waiting to die. Earth was so far away that the light from their sun would take years to reach this place, even if someone on Earth knew. They were in trouble. Help would never come in time. "We fight," Rick said. "We've been fighting for 3 months. We don't stop now." "With what?" Lisa asked. "Half our people are hurt. We have no weapons that can hurt their ships. We have no way to call for help." "Then we make them pay," Rick said. "We make them remember that humans don't give up." Jake knew Rick was right, but he also knew it would not matter. The Krillians had ships and soldiers and weapons. The humans had courage and anger, but that would not stop energy beams or explosions. As the night went on, Jake walked through the colony. He saw families holding each other, wondering if they would see another day. He saw children who did not understand why the adults were so scared. He saw people who had traveled across the galaxy to build something new, only to face slavery or death, but he also saw something else. He saw people who were not giving up. He saw Amy working on her radio, trying to find a way to send a message to anyone who might listen. He saw Ben fixing power cables in the dark, keeping the lights on for one more day. He saw Lisa taking care of the wounded, making sure they would be strong enough to fight if it came to that. The Krillians thought they knew humans. They thought humans were weak and would surrender when faced with superior force. They had done this to other species, and it had always worked. But they had never faced humans before. As dawn approached, Jake made his decision. They would not surrender. They would not become slaves. They would fight until the end, and maybe, just maybe, someone would remember that humans had been here. Someone would remember that they had refused to give up. The sun began to rise over New Haven Colony, and Jake Harrison prepared to give the Krillians his answer. 8 months before the sun rose over New Haven Colony, Admiral John Mitchell was sitting in his office on Earth. The office was high up in the Defense Command building, and he could see the blue ocean through the big windows. It was a peaceful morning, but that was about to change. John was 55 years old with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had been in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years, and he knew the sound of trouble when he heard it. Right now, he was hearing it from the communication device on his desk. "Sir, we have a priority message coming in from the outer sectors," said Lieutenant Corinne Lee. She was the duty officer for deep space communications, and she looked worried. "It's very weak, but the computers are trying to clean it up." John pressed a button on his desk. Put it through. The voice that came through the speaker was broken and full of static. It cut in and out, but John could hear enough to understand that someone was in serious trouble. This is New Haven Colony. Under attack. Need immediate assistance. Coordinates follow. The message repeated 3 times, then went silent. John stared at the speaker for a long moment. New Haven was one of the mining colonies in the Outer Rim, almost 2 months away by the fastest ships. It was so far from Earth that most people forgot it existed. When did this message arrive? John asked. About 10 minutes ago, sir. But the timestamp shows it was sent 8 months ago. It's been traveling through space all this time? John felt his heart sink. 8 months was a long time. The people who sent that message might already be dead. But he had to try to help them. That was what the Earth Defense Force was for. Get me President Carter on the line, John said. And call an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. We need to move fast. 2 hours later, John was sitting in a room with the most important people in Earth's government. President Helen Carter was a tall woman in her 60s with white hair and sharp green eyes. She had been a soldier before she became a politician, and she understood what needed to be done. Tell me about New Haven, she said. Paul Rogers, the intelligence director, opened a file on his tablet. He was a thin man who knew more secrets than anyone else on Earth. 3,000 colonists, mostly families. They've been mining rare metals on the moon of Apot 4 for about 5 years. Good people, hard workers. What about the attack? President Carter asked. We don't know much, Paul said. The message was too broken to get details. But long-range sensors have been picking up activity in that sector. Ships that don't match any known human designs. Aliens, said Fleet Admiral Susan Hayes. She was John's boss and one of the toughest people he had ever met. Susan was in her 40s with red hair and a voice that could make seasoned soldiers stand up straight. We've been tracking unknown ship movements for months. They're hitting colonies and mining stations throughout the Outer Rim. President Carter leaned back in her chair. How many ships do we have that can reach New Haven? The 7th Fleet is our best option, Susan said. 12 heavy cruisers, 48 destroyers, and the USS Liberty as flagship. About 15,000 crew members total. That's a lot of firepower, the president said. It might not be enough, Paul said quietly. We don't know what we're up against out there. John had been listening to the conversation, but now he spoke up. With respect, ma'am, it doesn't matter how many ships they have. Those are our people out there. We don't abandon our own. President Carter looked at him for a long moment. You're right, Admiral. How long to get the fleet ready? 2 weeks, Susan said. We'll need to stock supplies for a long journey and prepare for extended combat operations. Do it, the president said. And Admiral Mitchell, you'll be in command of the rescue operation. John nodded. He had hoped she would say that. The idea of leaving those colonists to die made him sick to his stomach. Even if they were already dead, the people who killed them needed to know that Earth would respond. Over the next 2 weeks, John watched the largest fleet in human history come together. The USS Liberty was a massive ship, almost 2 miles long, with enough firepower to destroy a small planet. The heavy cruisers were smaller, but still deadly, each one carrying enough weapons to level a city. The destroyers were fast and agile, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. Captain Danny Walsh commanded the heavy cruiser Defiant. He was a young man with black hair and eyes that missed nothing. He had grown up on a colony world and knew what it meant to live on the frontier. Captain Mary Johnson led the destroyer squadron. She was older than Danny, with blonde hair and a reputation for being fearless in battle. Dr. Alex Chun was the fleet's expert on alien life forms. He was a small man with thick glasses who had spent his whole life studying the possibility of meeting other intelligent species. Now that it was happening, he wished the circumstances were different. What do we know about these aliens? John asked during one of their planning meetings. Not much, Alex said. The ships we've detected are bigger than ours and seem to be designed for war. They use energy weapons and some kind of shield technology. They don't seem interested in communication. Hostile, then, said Colonel Steve Miller. He was the commander. of the Marine forces that would be going along on the mission. Steve was a big man with scars on his face from previous battles. "How do we fight them?" "Hit them hard and fast," said Captain Walsh. "Don't give them time to organize a defense." "We need to be careful," Alex said. "These aliens might have technology we don't understand. We could be walking into a trap." John looked around the table at his officers. They were all good people, and he was asking them to risk their lives for colonists they had never met. But he knew they would do it without question. That was the kind of people they were. Lieutenant Commander Tom Bradley was the fleet's intelligence officer. He was a quiet man who spent most of his time studying enemy tactics and looking for weaknesses. "Sir, I've been analyzing the ship movements we've detected. These aliens seem to follow a pattern. They hit a target, take what they want, then move on. They don't usually stay in one place for long." "What does that mean for New Haven?" John asked. "If the colonists are still alive, they might be prisoners. The aliens might be using them as workers or slaves." The thought of humans being enslaved by aliens made John's blood boil, but it also gave him hope. If the colonists were still alive, there was still time to save them. As the fleet prepared to leave Earth, John stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty and looked out at the other ships. The cruisers and destroyers were spread out in formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the sun. It was a beautiful sight, but John knew it represented something more important than beauty. It represented humanity's promise to protect its own. Navigation Officer Karen Lee was working at her station, plotting the course they would take through hyperspace. "Sir, we have multiple routes to the New Haven system. Some are faster but more dangerous. Others are safer but will take longer." "How much longer?" John asked. "The safe route would add about 2 weeks to our travel time." John thought about the colonists who might be suffering right now. 2 weeks could mean the difference between life and death for them. "We take the fast route. If these aliens want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." The fleet left Earth on a Tuesday morning. John watched his home planet shrink behind them until it was just another star in the darkness. He had been away from Earth many times before, but this felt different. This time, he was not just defending Earth, he was defending the idea that humans would never abandon each other. No matter how far apart they were, during the long journey through hyperspace, the fleet practiced combat maneuvers and prepared for battle. The Marines trained for ground combat while the ship crews drilled on weapon systems and damage control. Everyone knew they were heading into unknown danger, but no one complained. Dr. Linda Brooks was the fleet's chief medical officer. She was a woman in her 30s with brown hair and gentle hands that had saved many lives. She spent the journey preparing medical facilities and training nurses to handle combat wounds. She hoped she would not need to use her skills, but she knew better. As they got closer to the New Haven system, long-range sensors began picking up strange readings. There were definitely alien ships in the area, more than anyone had expected. The enemy was not just raiding the colony. They were occupying it. "Sir," said communications specialist Joey Adams, "I'm picking up a very weak signal from the New Haven system. It's human, but it's so faint I can barely make it out." John felt his heart speed up. "Can you clean it up?" "I'll try, sir." After several minutes of work, Joey managed to make the signal clear enough to understand. It was a young woman's voice, desperate and frightened. "This is Amy Blake of New Haven Colony. If anyone can hear this, we need help. We're running out of time. The aliens are giving us until dawn to surrender. We won't do it. We won't become slaves. But we can't hold out much longer. Please, if there's anyone out there, help us." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then John spoke, his voice firm and clear. "All ships, this is Admiral Mitchell. We are going to battle stations. Prepare for immediate combat upon arrival. We have people to save and a message to send. No one attacks humans and gets away with it." The fleet surged forward through hyperspace, racing toward a battle that would change everything. The Earth fleet moved through hyperspace like a river of steel and fire. Admiral John Mitchell stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the strange colors that swirled outside the windows. Hyperspace always looked different to everyone who saw it. Some people saw blue and green lights dancing like ghosts. Others saw nothing but darkness with tiny sparks. John saw what looked like a tunnel made of stars leading them toward their destination. 6 weeks. That was how long it would take to reach New Haven Colony. 6 weeks of traveling through the void between stars, not knowing if the people they were trying to save were still alive. John tried not to think about what might be happening to the colonists right now, but the thoughts came anyway. Sir, all ships are reporting normal hyperspace travel, said Navigation Officer Karen Lee. She was working at her station, checking the course they were following. We should arrive at New Haven right on schedule. Good, John said. How are the other ships holding up? All green across the board. Captain Walsh reports that the Defiant is running perfectly. Captain Johnson says her destroyers are ready for anything. John nodded and walked over to the tactical display. It showed the positions of all 60 ships in the fleet, spread out in a formation that would let them fight as soon as they dropped out of hyperspace. He had been planning this battle for weeks, but he knew that no plan survived contact with the enemy. In the ship's briefing room, Tactical Coordinator Ryan Scott was working with a team of officers to study every possible way the battle might go. Ryan was a young man with short brown hair and eyes that never seemed to stop moving. He had been in dozens of space battles, but never anything like this. The problem is, we don't know how many ships they have, Ryan said to the group. Long range sensors detected at least 50 enemy vessels, but there could be more hiding behind the moon or in asteroid fields. Lieutenant Commander Tom Bradley looked up from his notes. The intelligence report suggests these aliens prefer to fight in large groups. They use their numbers to overwhelm smaller forces. Well, they won't be overwhelming us, said Captain Danny Walsh. He had come over from the Defiant for the meeting. We've got more firepower than they've ever seen. Don't be so sure, said Dr. Alex Chun. The alien expert looked tired from studying every piece of information they had about the enemy. These Krillians have been conquering planets for a long time. They must be good at what they do, or they wouldn't have lasted this long. John entered the briefing room and everyone stood up. At ease, he said, then looked at the tactical display on the wall. What's our latest assessment? Ryan pointed to the image of the New Haven system. We'll drop out of hyperspace here about 12 hours from the colony. That should give us time to assess the situation and plan our attack. The enemy ships are concentrated around the moon, probably keeping the colonists under guard. What about ground forces? Asked Colonel Steve Miller. The Marine commander had been quiet during most of the planning sessions, but John knew he was thinking about how to get his troops onto the surface safely. Unknown, Tom said. We have to assume. They have soldiers on the ground, but we don't know how many or what kind of weapons they have. John studied the display for a long moment. We'll go with Plan Alpha. Fast attack on the enemy fleet, followed by Marine landings at multiple sites around the colony. Hit them hard before they know what's happening. While the officers planned their attack, the rest of the fleet prepared for battle in their own ways. In the Marine quarters, soldiers cleaned their weapons and checked their armor. These were men and women who had volunteered to fight in the most dangerous places in the galaxy. They came from all over Earth, from big cities and small towns. But they all shared one thing. They would not let innocent people suffer if they could help it. Marine Commander Pete Davis was walking through the barracks, talking to his troops. Pete was an older man with gray hair and hands that were covered in scars from old battles. He had been fighting for 30 years, and he knew how to keep soldiers calm before a big fight. Remember your training, he told a group of young Marines. Stick together, watch each other's backs, and don't try to be heroes. We're going in there to save people, not to prove how tough we are. Private Joey Sanders raised his hand. He was 19 years old and had never been in a real battle before. Sir, what if the colonists are already dead? Pete looked at the young man for a moment. Then we make sure the people who killed them pay for it. But we're going to assume they're alive until we know different. That's what keeps us fighting. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Linda Brooks was preparing for the worst. She had set up emergency surgery rooms and trained every available person in basic first aid. Linda was a small woman with red hair and steady hands. She had seen the results of space battles before, and she knew how bad the injuries could be. "We're going to have wounded coming in from multiple sources," she told her medical team. "Our own people, the colonists, and probably enemy casualties too. We treat everyone who needs help, regardless of what side they're on. That's what doctors do," Nurse Betty Adams nodded. She was younger than Linda, but had worked in emergency medicine on Earth. "What about the aliens? Do we know anything about their biology?" "Not much," Linda said. "Dr. Chun thinks they're reptilian, but that's just a guess. We'll have to figure it out as we go." Fighter Squadron Leader Nancy Wright was in the hangar bay, going over her ships with her pilots. Nancy was a woman in her 30s with black hair and the reflexes of a cat. She had been flying combat missions since she was 20, and she was one of the best pilots in the fleet. "These fighters are designed for space combat, but we might need to provide ground support too," she told her squadron. "That means flying low and fast through an atmosphere, dodging surface weapons, and trying not to hit our own people." Lieutenant Mark Phillips was Nancy's second in command. He was a quiet man who let his flying do the talking. "What about enemy fighters? Do we know if they have any?" "Unknown," Nancy said. "We have to be ready for anything. Air-to-air combat, ground attack, search and rescue, whatever the mission requires." As the weeks passed, the fleet conducted training exercises in hyperspace. Ships practiced fighting in formation while Marines rehearsed assault landings. The pilots flew mock combat missions, and the medical teams treated simulated casualties. Everyone knew that the real thing would be much harder than any training exercise, but the practice helped them feel ready. Communications specialist Joey Adams spent his time trying to intercept enemy transmissions. The Krillians were too far away for normal radio, but sometimes signals leaked through hyperspace in strange ways. Most of what he picked up was just noise, but occasionally he heard something that sounded like voices speaking in an alien language. "Sir, I think I'm getting pieces of their communications," Joey told Admiral Mitchell one day. "I can't understand what they're saying, but they seem to be talking to each other a lot. Maybe they're nervous about something." "Keep listening," John said. "Any information we can get might help us save lives." Supply Officer Greg Turner was working around the clock to make sure the fleet had everything it needed. Food, water, ammunition, spare parts, medical supplies, the list went on and on. Greg was a thin man who never seemed to sleep, but he made sure everyone else had what they needed to do their jobs. "We're carrying enough supplies for a 6-month campaign," Greg reported to John. "If this turns into a long fight, we'll be ready for it. Let's hope it doesn't come to that," John said. "The longer we're out here, the more time the colonists suffer." As they got closer to their destination, long-range sensors began picking up more detailed information about the enemy force. The news was not good. There were more Krillian ships than anyone had expected, including several that were much larger than human vessels. "Sir, I'm counting over 200 enemy ships," said sensor operator Bill Davis. He was a young man who had joined the fleet straight from the academy. "Some of them are huge, maybe twice the size of our biggest cruisers." John felt his stomach drop, but he kept his face calm. His crew was watching him, and they needed to see confidence, not fear. "Numbers aren't everything. We have better training, better technology, and something they don't have." "What's that, sir?" Bill asked. "We're fighting for our people." "They're just fighting because someone told them to. That makes all the difference." The final week of the journey was the hardest. Everyone knew they were close to battle, and the tension on every ship was thick enough to cut with a knife. John walked through the corridors of the Liberty, talking to his crew and making sure they were ready. In the ship's chapel, Chaplain Robert King was holding services for anyone who wanted to come. The chapel was crowded with people from all different religions, but they were all praying for the same thing, that they would be strong enough to save the colonists and brave enough to face whatever was waiting for them. "We're going into battle. Not for glory or conquest," Chaplain King said to the gathered crew members, We're going because it's the right thing to do. Because somewhere out there, people are counting on us to come for them, and we will not let them down. As the fleet prepared to drop out of hyperspace, John stood on the bridge and looked at his officers. These were good people, all of them. The first thing Commander Vextar noticed was the size of the human fleet. His yellow eyes stared at the display screen on his ship's bridge, watching as more and more vessels dropped out of hyperspace. He had expected maybe 10 or 15 ships. At most, what he was seeing was impossible. How many? He asked his weapons officer in the Krillian language, which sounded like rocks grinding together. Over 60 ships, Commander, and they are still coming. Vextar felt something he had not experienced in many years of conquest: fear. In all his battles across the galaxy, he had never faced a force this large. Most species could barely manage to build a few warships. The humans had brought an entire fleet. Send word to all ships, Vextar ordered. Prepare for battle and contact the ground forces. Tell them to be ready to destroy the colony if we start losing. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Admiral John Mitchell watched the tactical display as his fleet moved into position. The Krillian ships were spread out around New Haven's moon, just as the intelligence reports had predicted. But there were so many of them, dark shapes against the stars like a swarm of angry insects. All ships report ready for battle, said Communications Officer Joey Adams. His voice was steady, but John could see the young man's hands shaking slightly. Signal the fleet, John said. Attack Formation Alpha, Captain Walsh, take your cruisers and hit their left flank. Captain Johnson, your destroyers will punch through their center. We'll follow up with the Liberty and finish what you start. The first shots of the battle lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. The human cruisers opened fire with their main guns, sending beams of pure energy across the void. The Krillian ships responded with their own weapons, creating a light show that could be seen from the surface of the moon below. Captain Danny Walsh stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching his weapons officer target the enemy ships. Fire all guns, he ordered. The cruiser shuddered as its weapons unleashed their power. A Krillian ship exploded in a ball of fire, its hull torn apart by the human attack. Direct hit, reported the weapons officer. Enemy ship destroyed. Good, Danny said. Target the next one. We're just getting started. The Krillian ships were tough, but they had never faced weapons like the ones the humans carried. Earth scientists had been developing new military technology for decades, preparing for the day when they might meet hostile aliens. That day had finally come. Captain Mary Johnson's destroyer squadron moved like a pack of wolves, fast and deadly. Her ships were smaller than the cruisers, but they were quick enough to dodge enemy fire while striking back with their own weapons. Mary had grown up on a farm, and she knew how to work as part of a team. Squadron leaders, this is Johnson, she said into her communicator. Spread out and hit them from all angles. Don't let them concentrate their fire on any one ship. The destroyers split up and attacked the Krillian formation from multiple directions. The aliens had not expected this kind of coordinated assault. Their ships were designed to overwhelm smaller forces, not to fight a fleet this size and this. Organized on the surface of New Haven's moon. The colonists were watching the battle through whatever windows they could find. Jake Harrison stood in the command center, looking up at the sky where explosions were lighting up the darkness like lightning during a storm. They came, Amy Blake whispered, tears running down her face. They actually came for us. Dr. Lisa. Martinez was bandaging a wounded colonist, but she kept looking out the window. How many ships do you think there are? I don't know, Jake said. But it's the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. The battle was not going well for the Krillians. They had expected to fight a small rescue force, not the largest fleet in human history. Their commander, Vextar, was learning what many other alien species would soon discover: humans did not abandon their own. All ships, concentrate fire on the large human vessel, Vextar ordered. He was looking at the USS Liberty, which was moving toward the center of the battle like a mountain of metal and weapons. The Krillian ships turned their guns on the Liberty, But the massive human ship was protected by shields that could stop almost anything. Admiral Mitchell felt the ship shake as enemy weapons hit the hull, but the damage was minimal. "Return fire," John ordered. "All weapons full power." The Liberty's guns were the largest weapons humanity had ever built. When they fired, the entire ship shook, and the energy beams that came out were bright enough to blind anyone who looked directly at them. 3 Krillian ships disappeared in balls of flame and debris. Fighter squadron leader Nancy Wright was leading her pilots in a series of attacks on the smaller enemy ships. Her fighters were tiny compared to the big warships, but they were fast and hard to hit. Nancy had been flying since she was old enough to reach the controls, and she knew how to make her ship dance through space. "Blue Squadron, follow me in," she said to her pilots. "Hit the engines on that big one, then get out before they can target us." The fighters swooped down on a Krillian battlecruiser like birds attacking a giant. Their weapons were small, but they were precise. The alien ship's engines exploded, leaving it floating helplessly in space. "Nice work, Blue Squadron," Nancy said. "Now let's find another target." The battle had been going on for 6 hours when the tide finally turned. The human fleet had destroyed or disabled more than half of the Krillian ships, while losing only a few destroyers. The aliens were starting to panic, and their formation was falling apart. Commander Vexstar realized that he was going to lose this battle. He had never lost a battle before, and the thought made him angry. If he could not have the human colony, then no one would. "Signal the ground forces," he ordered. "Begin destroying the colony. Kill all the humans." But Colonel Steve Miller's Marines were already on their way to the surface. The big transport ships had launched while the space battle was keeping the enemy busy. Steve stood in the lead transport, checking his weapon one more time. He was a soldier, and soldiers protected innocent people. "Remember, we're here to save lives, not take them," he told his Marines. "But if the aliens want to fight, we'll give them a fight they won't forget." The Marine transports landed at 3 different points around New Haven Colony. Steve's group landed right in the middle of the main settlement, where the colonists were hiding in their buildings. The Marines came out of their ships ready for battle, and they found it waiting for them. The Krillian ground troops were tall and strong, with claws and teeth that could tear through metal. But they had never fought human Marines before. The Marines had trained for this kind of combat their entire careers. They moved like a machine, each soldier covering the others as they advanced through the colony. Sergeant Bill Davis led his squad in an attack on the Krillian command post. Bill was a big man from Texas who had joined the Marines to see the galaxy. He had not expected to be fighting aliens, but he was ready for it. "Grenades out," he shouted to his men. The explosions cleared the way for the Marines to advance. The Krillians fought hard, but they were used to fighting civilians and poorly armed colonists. Fighting trained soldiers was something completely different. Jake Harrison watched from the command center as the Marines swept through the colony. He had never been so happy to see anyone in his life. The soldiers moved with purpose and skill, driving the aliens back with every step. "This is Colonel Miller," came a voice over the radio. "Colony Administrator Harrison, are you receiving?" Jake grabbed the radio with shaking hands. "This is Harrison. We're here, we're alive." "Good to hear, sir. We're securing the area now. How many colonists do you have?" "About 2,800, Jake said. "We lost some in the fighting, but most of us made it." "Understood. Stay where you are until we give the all-clear." In space, the battle was nearly over. The Krillian fleet was broken and scattered. Some ships were trying to escape, but the human destroyers were hunting them down. Others were surrendering their crews, hoping for mercy. Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the last enemy ship explode on his tactical display. The battle was won, but he did not feel like celebrating yet. There were still people on the surface who needed help. "Signal all ships," he said. "Begin search and rescue operations. I want every colonist accounted for and every wounded person treated, and prepare boarding parties for the surrendering enemy ships." Commander Vexstar sat in his command chair, staring at the ruins of his fleet. His ship was damaged and drifting, most of his crew was dead or wounded, and the humans were demanding his surrender. He had been a warrior for 40 years, and he had never been defeated. A human voice came over his ship's communicator, speaking in perfect Krillian. "This is Admiral Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Your fleet is destroyed, and your ground forces have been defeated. Surrender now, and your surviving crew will be treated according to the laws of war." Vexstar looked around his bridge at the few officers who were still alive. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. He could try to fight to the death, but that would only get more of his people killed. For the first time in his life, he was going to surrender. "This is Commander Vexstar," he said in English. "I surrender. My ship and my remaining forces, we will not resist boarding." 3 days after the battle, Admiral John Mitchell stood in the cargo bay of a captured Krillian ship. The alien vessel smelled strange, like metal and something that might have been their food. Around him, human marines were guarding about 200 Krillian prisoners. The aliens sat on the floor with their hands bound, their yellow eyes staring at the humans with a mixture of fear and confusion. Commander Vexstar was among the prisoners, but he was kept separate from the others. The Krillian leader had deep cuts on his face from the battle, and his green scales were darker than usual. John had been told that this meant the alien was either sick or very angry. "Probably both. What do you plan to do with us?" Vexstar asked, in his rough English. "Will you kill us as we would kill you?" John looked at the alien commander for a long moment. It would be easy to execute all the prisoners. They were raiders and slavers who had hurt innocent people. But that was not what humans did. That was what made them different from the Krillians. "No," John said, "you're going back to your people. But you're going to carry a message with you." Vexstar's eyes narrowed. "What message?" "That humanity has arrived in this part of the galaxy, and that any attack on human colonies will be met with the full force of Earth's military." John walked over to a communication device that his technicians had set up. Captain Nick Phillips, who commanded the fleet's scout ships, was working on the recording equipment. Nick was a thin man with quick hands who understood alien technology better than most humans. "Is it ready?" John asked. "Yes, sir. This message will be broadcast on all Krillian military frequencies. Every ship in their empire will receive it." John stood in front of the camera and straightened his uniform. He knew that what he said next would be heard by millions of aliens across dozens of star systems. His words would either prevent future wars or start bigger ones. But he also knew that sometimes you had to take a stand, even if it was dangerous. "This is Admiral John Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force," he began. 3 days ago, your forces attacked the human colony of New Haven. You enslaved innocent people and tried to destroy their homes. This was a mistake. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The Krillian Empire has been expanding across this sector for years, conquering weaker species and taking what you want. But humanity is not weak. We are not afraid. And we do not abandon our people. John gestured toward the prisoners behind him. These are your surviving warriors. We could have killed them all, but we chose mercy. We are sending them back to you as a warning. Leave human colonies alone or face the consequences. The recording was sent out on every frequency the Krillians used. Within hours, it was being played on alien ships throughout the sector. The message was simple but clear. Humans were now a power to be respected and feared on New Haven's surface. The work of rebuilding had already begun. Dr. Linda Brooks had set up a field hospital in the colony's main building, treating both human colonists and wounded Krillian prisoners. The alien biology was strange, but Linda was a good doctor who could figure out how to help anyone who needed it. "How are they doing?" asked Jake Harrison as he visited the hospital. The colony administrator looked tired but happy. His people were safe, and that was all that mattered to him. "Better than expected," Linda said. "Most of the injuries were from the fighting, not disease or starvation. These colonists are tough people." Jake nodded and looked around the hospital. Human Marines were standing guard, but they were also helping to carry supplies and comfort frightened children. The soldiers who had come to fight were now working to heal and rebuild. Amy Blake was back in the communications center, but now she was talking to Earth instead of begging for help. The young woman had become something of a hero when her desperate message had reached the rescue fleet. News reporters from Earth wanted to interview her, and other colonies were asking for her advice on emergency communications. "This is New Haven calling Earth Control," Amy said into her new radio. "All colonists accounted for, medical facilities operational. We're ready to resume mining operations whenever you give the word." The voice that answered came from Earth, 28 light-years away. But with the new communication relay ships that Admiral Mitchell had left behind, the conversation was almost instant. "New Haven, this is Earth Control. Take all the time you need to rebuild. The galaxy is watching what happened there, and we want to make sure you're completely safe before resuming normal operations." Jake walked over to Amy's station. "How does it feel to be famous?" Amy smiled. "Weird, I was just doing my job. I never thought anyone would actually hear that message." "But they did," Jake said. "And because of that, 3,000 people are still alive. While the colonists rebuilt their homes, the effects of the battle were spreading across the galaxy. The news that a previously unknown species had defeated the Krillian Empire was traveling from star system to star system. Some alien governments were worried about this new human threat. Others were excited about the possibility of an ally against their enemies. Ambassador Claire Roberts arrived at New Haven 2 weeks after the battle. She was a diplomat from Earth who had been sent to make contact with other species in the sector. Claire was a smart woman in her 50s who spoke several alien languages and understood how to negotiate with different cultures. The Zephyrian Republic wants to establish trade relations, she told Admiral Mitchell during one of their meetings. "They've been fighting the Krillians for decades, and they're impressed by what we accomplished here." "What about the other species?" John asked. "Mixed reactions. The hegemony is concerned about human military power. They're used to being the strongest force in this region. But the smaller species are mostly relieved. They see us as potential protectors." John looked out the window at the human ships that were still patrolling the system. "We didn't come here to conquer anyone. We just wanted to save our people." "I know," Claire said. "But actions speak louder than words. The galaxy has seen what happens when someone attacks humans. Now they're all trying to figure out what that means for them." The Krillian Empire was also dealing with the aftermath of their defeat. For the first time in their history, they had lost an entire fleet. The news was spreading through their territory, and some of their subject species were starting to rebel. If the mighty Krillians could be defeated, maybe they were not as invincible as everyone thought. Emperor Kreshtar, the leader of the Krillian Empire, was in his throne room when the message from Admiral Mitchell arrived. The Emperor was old, even by Krillian standards, with scars covering his entire body. He had built his empire through conquest and fear. But now he was facing something he had never encountered before, a species that could fight back. "What do you know about these humans?" he asked his intelligence chief. "Very little, Your Majesty. They appear to come from a single star system, but they have technology that matches or exceeds our own. Their ships are heavily armed, and their soldiers fight with great skill." The Emperor stared at the image of Admiral Mitchell on his screen. "And they sent this message to us directly?" "Yes, Your Majesty. They wanted to make sure we understood their position." Kreshtar was quiet for a long time. He was thinking about the implications of what had happened. The Krillian Empire had been expanding for centuries, taking what they wanted from weaker species. Now they had encountered a species that was not weak, that would fight back, that had the power to defeat them. "Send word to all fleet commanders," he finally said. "Human colonies are to be avoided. We will not attack them unless they attack us first. Your Majesty, this will be seen as a sign of weakness." "Better to be seen as weak than to be destroyed," the Emperor replied. "These humans have shown us what they can do. We will not test them again." Back on New Haven, Chief Engineer Ben Cooper was working with a team of Earth engineers to rebuild the colony's infrastructure. The new facilities were being built stronger and better than before. The colonists had learned from their experience, and they were preparing for the possibility of future attacks. The new power plant will be underground, Ben explained to Jake Harrison. And we're building multiple communication arrays so we can't be cut off again. What about defenses? Jake asked. Admiral Mitchell is leaving a squadron of destroyers to patrol the system. And we're getting our own defensive weapons. Nothing too fancy, but enough to hold off raiders until help arrives. Dr. Lisa Martinez had been promoted to head of Colonial Medical Services for the entire sector. She was organizing medical supplies and training programs for other colonies that might face similar attacks. The doctor had learned a lot about treating combat injuries, and she wanted to share that knowledge with others. We can't prevent all attacks, she told a group of colonial administrators, but we can be better prepared for them. Medical training, emergency supplies, communication protocols, these things can save lives when help is on the way. 6 months after the battle, New Haven had become the unofficial capital of human expansion in the sector. The colony was now home to 5,000 people, including scientists, soldiers, and diplomats. Ships from a dozen different species came to trade and negotiate, making the small mining colony one of the busiest ports in the region.